There are times when I regret making comedy special reviews a part of my content. This is one of them. Jeff Dunham's Scrooged-Up holiday special is a genuinely bad special. Bad enough that this is one of the few times I've considered not even giving it a second watch. It was only through a heroic amount of effort and willpower that I was able to bring myself to do so, and to make this review. That is how bad this special is. But let's back up a bit. Like most of you, I'm guessing, I hadn't thought of Jeff Dunham in a very long time. With most of the comedians I've covered on this channel, I'm either familiar with them or I haven't really watched any of their comedy. Jeff Dunham is a bit different. The only person I could really compare him to, in terms of my familiarity with his work, would be another Jeff, of the Foxworthy variety. If you followed stand-up comedy back in the mid to late 2000s, you'll remember how massive blue-collar comedy was. For a while there, Jeff Dunham was riding a similar wave of fame and success. But if I'm being honest, I'd say I haven't watched any of Jeff Dunham's comedy in at least 10 years, if not 15. I really hadn't even heard of him much in that time. Imagine my shock when I learned that Jeff has released 9 comedy specials in the last 14 years. Actually, you probably don't have to imagine it because I'm sure you're feeling the same shock yourself. This is his 3rd holiday special. Also, holiday special? It's a shame to see that even the bastion of free speech that is Jeff Dunham hasn't been able to escape the woke mind virus. This is all to say that while I'm not clueless about Jeff Dunham's comedy style, I've also been out of the loop for some time. All I really know is the stuff I watched a decade and a half ago. Fortunately for me, Jeff's act has barely changed in that time span. Before we actually start talking about the special, I want to mention 2 things. First, the set design for this special is incredible. This is genuinely one of the only redeeming qualities of the show. The set is beautiful and very effective at establishing the Christmas theme, even though the special was shot in August in Milwaukee. This is important because the framing device of the special is that Jeff wants to make a live-action adaptation of A Christmas Carol, and he's going to be casting his dolls in the roles of the various characters.
For my next stand-up special, how about if it's me talking to the guys about their possible roles in the film and what characters I think they should play?
Why a Christmas special, you ask? Because that is what Jeff grew up celebrating. If he had been Jewish, it would have been a Hanukkah special, and if he was black, it would have been a Kwanzaa special. Yes, he did say that.
If I was black, this might be a Kwanzaa special.
Don't bother remembering this, though, because I lied. It's actually not important to the show at all. Jeff just uses this framing device to introduce his dolls and occasionally shoehorn in some forced jokes about Christmas. This brings me to my next point. Because Jeff is a ventriloquist, the performance is broken up into multiple smaller segments featuring Jeff's characters. They are Walter, Bubba J, Little Jeff, Peanut, and Ahmed the Dead Terrorist. Theoretically, these are supposed to be different characters, but in most cases it comes down to Jeff doing basically the same jokes in different voices. But we will get to the repetition a bit later. The first segment from the special features Walter, and it is the one that most closely fits the Christmas Carol casting idea that was laid out by Dunham in the beginning. It makes perfect sense because the character of Walter is a curmudgeonly older man, and who better to play Ebenezer Scrooge? Once that vague bit of setup is out of the way, Jeff hops into his usual skits and bits. To set the tone here, one of the first jokes from this segment is Walter saying that his favorite Christmas carol,
"In the one that makes me feel joy and hope and a beautiful peace inside,"
is Grandma Got Run Over by a Reindeer. What a timely reference. Something that should be mentioned fairly early on is that there aren't a lot of bigger overarching premises to Jeff's act. It's largely a back and forth with a lot of smaller bits between Jeff and the dolls. The first of these bits, after the initial introduction of Walter, is Jeff bringing up that this special will be on Amazon, which leads to a series of hilarious and relatable comments about the size of Amazon boxes.
"They ship me my toothpick in a box the size of a Yugo."
Jeff questions Walter about his choice of reference, to which Walter responds that Jeff would have preferred he mentioned a Prius.
"A blue Prius?"
From what I can glean from a Google search, this appears to be a callback to a joke Jeff made on his 2007 comedy special, Spark of Insanity. But in my opinion, the Prius bit signals a bigger problem with the special. It feels dated. Saying somebody drives a Prius is the kind of reference you'd make in the early 2000s to suggest that they were some sort of small-penised liberal environmentalist, instead of a red-blooded, gas-guzzling American. A lot of the special feels like that. It's hokey. Jeff tries to stay relevant with occasional references to recent events and mentions of modern social issues like political correctness or diversity, but they tend to feel forced. Speaking of, it only took 6.5 minutes, but we got it.
Whatever. Tell everyone what you gave your wife last Christmas.
COVID.
No.
We got the COVID joke in 2024. From here, we get into some meta, fourth wall breaking jokes when Walter is asked if he has ever done any acting, and he says that he laughs at Jeff's jokes.
It's not funny.
No, not usually. They're not. Oh, yeah.
We quickly get back to the discussion of which character Walter will be playing in the Christmas Carol movie, and he asks if he'll be playing the kid with the crutch, which leads to some hilarious miscommunication when they talk about Tiny Tim.
Why are we suddenly talking about your... Oh, the kid!
Get it? They're talking about his cock. Don't worry, because if you didn't get it, Jeff is going to make that painfully and repeatedly clear to you.
I thought you were talking about your Walter, Tiny Tim. Walter? Good place to hang the mistletoe, that's all I'm saying. You know, the twigs and berries.
After this, we get back into the meta humor again when Walter says that Jeff's parents must be embarrassed of him because he wasted his degree to run a puppet show. When Jeff protests, Walter points out that he's arguing with himself.
You're also losing this argument!
It's not a bad premise the first time you hear it, but even within this segment, he kind of beats a dead horse with jokes about Jeff being lonely and a loser for being a ventriloquist, in spite of the obvious fact that he is a highly successful and wealthy comedian. To cap it off, we get a totally necessary callback to the Tiny Tim penis joke from earlier.
Not Kevin, that's Home Alone. Well, that's you as a kid, home alone, playing with your Tiny Tim.
The good news is, if you enjoy these jokes, this special is going to be a blast for you. But for those of us who didn't suffer a traumatic brain injury that makes it impossible to form short-term memories, these jokes get old pretty quickly. Now, I talked about this segment of the special for longer than I will talk about some of the others, for the simple fact that it establishes a lot of general premises and joke formats that you'll see throughout the rest of the special, because several of them operate along very similar lines. The next character, not so much. The second character Jeff brings out is Bubba J, and this is where the wheels already start to fall off. Bubba J is, how do I say this politically correctly? He's a drunken, possibly mentally retarded redneck. That's the character, and Jeff hammers it home repeatedly with basically every bottom-of-the-barrel stereotype you could make about that demographic. It's so on the nose that if Jeff wasn't friends with some of the blue-collar comedy guys, I would think it was a direct attack on them. Jeff's material isn't exactly highbrow. In fact, about 30% of the special appears to be genital jokes, but shit fucking craters as soon as his character is brought out. Jeff opens up this segment by saying that Bubba J is the perfect person to play a ghost of Christmas past. Bubba J laughs like an idiot and says, ho ho ho, but when Jeff corrects him that it's not Christmas yet,
It's not Christmas yet. Oh, well then, hold my beer.
In less than a minute, we get 3 more jokes about Bubba drinking too much, but I'm not going to focus on them because they're just mediocre, and there are truly criminal jokes I want to get to instead. Jeff says that Christmas is his favorite time of year because it's all about loving your fellow man. This predictably sparks a gay joke from Bubba J, who asks if Jeff's wife knows about this.
You should be upfront with Audrey about that. I had no idea.
But it gets much weirder. I watched this special with other people because I knew it was going to be a fucking doozy, and we all had the same reaction to this punchline. Utter confusion.
She's gonna be like, Jeff, why do you now like the hot dogs more than the honey baked ham?
It doesn't make any sense. And I think even Jeff kind of recognized that fact because he goes on to attempt to explain the punchline.
The honey baked ham. It's warm. That's enough.
Honey baked ham is such an odd euphemism for a vagina that it kind of boggles my mind. Even if you needed to keep this particular gay joke in the special for some reason, there are better foods you could have referenced, like roast beef. It wouldn't really be funnier, but honey baked ham is just confusing. Jeff decides to double tap the gay jokes while talking about presents and says it's better to give than receive, to which Bubba adds,
Especially when you're in prison.
If that wasn't bad enough, he calls back to the honey-baked ham joke from a minute ago.
No honey-baked ham.
The next 3 or so minutes are a melange of redneck jokes, like Bubba saying that his wife bakes meth for Christmas and she can put colored sprinkles on it.
Whoops, what I said colored.
This isn't the first or worst attempt at social commentary, but it's one of the most forced feeling. Bubba follows this up by saying that he thought that Baby It's Cold Outside was canceled because of global warming. For a minute, Jeff gets back to the concept of A Christmas Carol and how it's about a man who learns the meaning of Christmas or whatever.
Was it during a Zoom meeting?
Because one time Bubba learned during a Zoom meeting the importance of turning a camera off during personal time. This special is so bad that Jeff is ripping off material from Joe Rogan, but that just goes to show how unfunny Joe Rogan is because his version of the joke was still somehow worse than the one told by a doll with a redneck accent. As bad as this has been so far, it continues to get worse. Jeff asks Bubba J if Santa came down the chimney at his house when he was growing up, and Bubba says he didn't because they lived in a mobile home.
My parents said he came up the tailpipe.
Get it? It's a joke about butt sex. There is some really tepid material in here about how Bubba's dad kind of looked like Santa and used to say ho ho ho, but it was when Bubba's 3 sisters were leaving the house. One time, Bubba's dad said ho 4 times, but that was because his mom was going with his sisters.
Was your father that mean? No, he was just counting.
Ho ho ho, more like ha ha ha, because these jokes are hilarious. Following this, Jeff brings up Dickens, and based on everything we've heard so far, I would like you to guess what kind of joke he's going to make here. Take your time if you need to. Would it surprise you to learn that it was another dick joke?
Oh yeah, yesterday I stepped on a rake and it hit me in the dickens. No.
We get some more weird political commentary when Jeff says that they're shooting Scrooge.
Oh, well, I hope he's white, because otherwise it's going to be a hate crime.
This is one of those jokes that gets a groan from the audience, and it deserves it. It's not just the social commentary that feels forced here, it's the setup. Framing it as shooting Scrooge to shoehorn in a bizarre race joke that barely makes sense. Similarly, a little while later, Jeff says that he wants Bubba to play a ghost. Bubba thinks it's a bad idea because
it never goes well when there's a redneck in a white sheet.
This joke is actually less forced than the shooting Scrooge one, but only barely. Unfortunately, it's ripped almost word for word from a joke on Jeff's 2012 special, Minding the Monsters. I only know this because I happened to watch a compilation of Bubba J moments on YouTube, and this was one of them. If I comb through more of Jeff's specials, I have a feeling I'd come across more instances of similar joke recycling. After this, we get another string of jokes about drinking, interspersed with more jokes at the expense of rednecks and hillbillies. As Bubba says that he gets out of DUIs by doing a British accent and the cops believe him because he has bad teeth. This eventually leads to one of the only somewhat funny jokes on the special, when Jeff says that Queen Victoria was queen until she was 82. Bubba responds by asking if they convinced her not to run for a second term. By the standard of most comedy specials, this would be a forgettable joke. But in this barren hellscape, a moderately coherent bit of comedy and political commentary is like a glass of ice water in hell. After this shit show, we get to the closing portion of the Bubba J segment, which is called Bubba J's Eggnog Shots and Christmas Thoughts.
This is the part of the show where you get to hear about what I think about after I've had a few too many.
Get it? Because Christmas and drunk redneck? Have you put on your laughing hats yet? Because you're gonna need them. I obviously can't play all of these jokes for you, but I will at least read them to you. I had to experience this, so you do too. Keep in mind everything I say was said by the puppet and not me.
Every Christmas, my mother bakes us cookies and a gingerbread halfway house.
Think about this. Is Cindy Lou Who Chinese? Is it wrong for a snowman to ask Santa for a bigger carrot? If the Grinch stole Kwanzaa, will the Democrats say it's Trump's fault? When the little drummer boy played for the baby Jesus, was that the peak of his career? Did the 3 wise men include gift receipts? Maybe Santa wouldn't have to check his list twice if he used a bigger font. Duh. Is Santa bipolar? Get it? When Santa goes to a strip club, does he make it snow? If there's an earthquake on Christmas in Los Angeles, I bet you'll find a shelf on an elf. For Christmas this past year, I got my wife a boob job. For Christmas this coming year, I'll get her the other one. And finally, can a gingerbread man transition? Jeff asks what he would become. Bubba responds with,
A donut hole.
Mercifully, this marks the end of the Bubba J segment. The Bubba J portion of this special is one of the worst things I've ever seen. It's undeniably the worst part of the special from a comedy perspective, and the only saving grace is probably that it's only about 15 minutes long. If I had to listen to a whole special of these jokes, I'd probably start sticking forks in electrical outlets. I'm sure this comedy special appeals to some people out there, but for me, it was just abysmal. 90% of this routine is just a slight tweak on a couple of premises. Bubba drinks a lot. He's a redneck / inbred. And there are a bunch of references to genitals or butt sex. It feels like Jeff is tapped out of material after the first minute or two and just keeps cycling through, with the added problem of trying to shoehorn in Christmas references and half-baked political commentary. If you're the kind of person who really can't get enough of Larry the Cable Guy, this might be hilarious to you. But it wasn't funny to me. Moving on, before I blow a fucking gasket. For the next segment, Jeff brings out Little Jeff, which is the doll version of himself. Normally, I write these reviews in a couple of passes. After I watch the special, I write something based on my first impressions, what I remember off the top of my head, and some of the notes I might have taken the first time around. I really couldn't remember much from the Little Jeff segment aside from it being a glorified ad read. It's not the worst part of the special, but it is probably the most forgettable. Really, the only thing that stood out to me was the strange amount of jokes at the expense of the homeless that are exclusive to this portion of the show.
Well, you have dressed me like a bum.
Okay, we're really not supposed to use the word bum anymore.
Am I supposed to be homeless?
Not homeless.
I'm not really sure what the point was, but there are a number of them during the Little Jeff segment and nowhere else as far as I can remember.
So he's unemployed and he's a foreigner. Bust him to California, they'll love his ass.
Given how much time I spent on the other parts of the special, I just decided to largely skip over this segment. Because, as I said, it's basically an advertisement for the Little Jeff doll that you can purchase on Amazon.
I don't look like this when you buy the box. I don't have on this stupid hat and the bum clothes.
I don't know why you would want to. Perhaps you're severely mentally ill and you want to pretend that the voices you hear in your head are actually coming out of the mouth of a tiny simulacrum of Jeff Dunham. If that's the case, it will only cost you $200 to give life to the maelstrom of unspeakable thoughts rampaging through your broken mind. That said, you might want to read the fine print because I can say from personal experience that the doll told me to do it doesn't really hold up in court. Beyond trying to sell you a doll, the Little Jeff segment is pretty boring. That brings me to Peanut. The Peanut segment is, well, I can't say it's worse than the Little Jeff segment, because Peanut is at least a more interesting character. In theory, after Jeff informs him about the Christmas movie idea, Peanut states that his favorite thing about Christmas is
the MILF on a shelf.
You might have heard of an elf on a shelf and now you're confused, but let me clear things up. Peanut says his friend's mom is incredibly hot and incredibly short, so MILF on a shelf. This is followed immediately by a camel toe joke.
Can't wait to kiss her under the camel toe. Mistletoe, mistletoe, mistletoe.
I'm sure that got as big of an applause break from you guys at home as it did for the people in attendance. In one of the least forced setups from the special, Peanut says that he wants to play the rabbi, but Jeff tells him there isn't a rabbi in A Christmas Carol. So Peanut suggests he change the story because these days you need to be diverse, equitable, and inclusive. Yes, he actually says all three of them.
Be diverse and equitable and inclusive.
In case you missed the joke and needed it spelled out for you. Frankly, I'm surprised he didn't actually flash the letters and Christmas lights on the screen behind him or something. It does lead to a moderately funny punchline when Jeff responds to Peanut's diversity comments by saying, "You're here." This results in a back and forth between Jeff and Peanut, where they debate whether Peanut fills the diversity quota or counts as a person of color because he's purple.
I'm of color. No one who is of color is purple.
Peanut lists off other purple individuals like Barney and Grimace, but Jeff says they don't count because they're not real and Peanut is. It's ultimately just another joke about how Jeff is actually crazy.
Until everyone figures out that you're a danger to yourself and those around you.
Which is reasonably funny the first time around, but not after you've heard it several times already. Which is the problem with the Peanut segment. It's nothing but more of the same. Sex jokes and forced attempts at social commentary, but just delivered by a slightly more manic persona. The bigger issue, though, is that this segment is actually another thinly veiled ad. Partway through the bit, Peanut says that he's decided he's going to change his role in the movie to the ghost of Christmas presents, not Christmas present. Then he yells for Jeff's assistant, the comedically named Marnell, to bring out the present he got for Jeff. What's inside the box? It's actually the version of the Peanut doll that you can buy on Amazon. For like a solid minute, Jeff just hawks this product, down to commenting on the quality of the box.
So even the box is great. We made it like a little steamer trunk. It has stickers on it and a handle, easy to carry.
And the fact that the hands were 3D scanned from the real Peanut, after which Peanut tells Jeff to make the doll talk. This leads to a lengthy and unfunny explanation of the process of ventriloquism, after which Peanut once again tells Jeff to make the doll talk. The joke, and I'm putting heavy quotations around that word, is that Jeff pretends he's bad at ventriloquism and mocks the bigger Peanut by doing a bad impression of the character.
I'm so stupid, I don't know, blah.
This goes on for a long time.
What the hell was what, big ugly Peanut?
An excruciatingly long time.
Blah, 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 blah.
Nearly 3 full minutes of this. By the end, Jeff is mostly just making baby noises.
Blah, 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 blah. I'm funny telling stupid jokes. Blah.
I honestly don't know what to make of it, because it's unlike anything I've ever seen before. So, at least in this small, insane way, Jeff has made a contribution to stand-up comedy. Beyond this, there isn't much to say about the Peanut segment. The little Jeff and Peanut segments taken together, though, are damning. 18 minutes in the heart of a stand-up special is given over to what is basically a QVC show with some dick jokes and forced social commentary thrown in. I feel like any other comic would be rightfully shredded for even attempting something this shameless. The last character Jeff brings out is Ahmed the Dead Terrorist, who is going to be cast as the ghost of Christmas yet to come. Ahmed is an interesting character because before I watched this special, I would have assumed he debuted in something like 2002. It just has that feeling of a character created based on the Islamophobia and anti-Arab sentiment that was socially acceptable in America in the early 2000s. But Ahmed actually debuted in 2007 on Jeff's comedy special, Spark of Insanity. By 2024, it's a strange character to still be doing. And this isn't me trying to be woke and saying that comedians shouldn't be making fun of certain groups of people. It just feels dated. Like, imagine if Jeff had a character named Ivan who was a stereotypical Cold War-era general, and he told Yakov Smirnov-style jokes about Soviet Russia. I don't know. Maybe that character would still do well in the parts of America where fast food restaurants serve bread as a side dish. Despite Jeff's insistence that this character isn't supposed to represent a stereotype of a Muslim, Ahmed repeatedly calls the audience infidels.
Merry Christmas, infidels! To all the evil infidel children around the world.
There is also a 72 virgins joke,
72 virgins?
as well as a reference to SEAL Team 6 and Osama bin Laden within 3 minutes of this character being on stage.
Oh, SEAL Team 6? I knew a guy that happened to. Yeah? Talking about Osama. Yes, that was awful what happened.
And that time frame also includes Ahmed doing a musical number aimed at Walter that he calls Deck the Hells, which is honestly one of the worst things from the entire special.
Death to my tal Ebenezer, die.
Unfortunately, it's too long to play for copyright reasons, and I can't really chop it up without ruining the effect. Maybe I'll try to make something for a YouTube short because the copyright rules seem a little bit different there. Either way, it was so unfunny and so cringeworthy that I wanted to find a hole to crawl into for the entire duration that Ahmed was singing. It's unbelievably, mind-bogglingly bad. Mixed in here, we get another forced political correctness joke when Ahmed asks if we have to call elves vertically challenged North Poleans. However, this bit is short-lived as we jump back into the Muslim stereotype material when Ahmed says that on second thought, he can't be Santa because he's on a no-fly list. Where things go from bad to worse is when Ahmed says that he traded 8 of his best goats for 8 of Santa's best reindeer.
And they are virgin reindeer.
You might be wondering how one can tell if a reindeer is a virgin or not. Well, Ahmed has an answer for you.
The red nose is still intact.
I'm not going to try to unravel the logic of this joke because A, If I did that for every joke from this special, it would be 5 hours long, and there's jokes from just this specific segment that are even more confusing. B, it's just another lowbrow genital joke, and C, of all of Jeff's half-hearted attempts at being edgy, this is one of the few that actually comes close to accomplishing that goal. On the heels of this joke, we get some lukewarm material about how Santa's workshop is not located in China.
Or as Trump calls it, China.
As always with Jeff Dunham, his observations are right on time, 7 years ago. This does lead Ahmed to come to the conclusion that it's good that China isn't in Virginia,
Because then Trump would say, I'm having a rally in Vagina.
I want you to really contemplate that joke. Let it wash over you. Take it all in. I'm going to put the quote up in big font on the screen so that you can pause the video and just try to make sense of this for as long as you desire. I assume that by now you've given up and decided to continue watching the review instead. Unfortunately, it doesn't get much better from here. There are some more jokes about China, but they're the lowest common denominator stuff about TikTok and how the elves might actually be Chinese children. This is where we get into the physical comedy. It starts when Jeff says that Ahmed's role in the play will be to take Scrooge to a cemetery.
You take Scrooge to a cemetery and simply point to his grave.
Which Ahmed can't do because he can't move his arms. Then his arms fall off. Then his ribs fall off. Ahmed asks Jeff what they're going to do, and Jeff says they could get some barbecue sauce. I bet you can't guess what hilarious reference he uses here.
I want my baby back, baby back.
I am vaguely familiar enough with the Ahmed character to know that this is a part of the bit, and some of the physical comedy here isn't totally terrible. The part where Jeff tries to reattach Ahmed's ribs and Ahmed can't stop laughing because he's ticklish is predictable, but moderately amusing by the standard of the special. On the other hand, this goes on for 4 straight minutes. Much of that is filler where Jeff literally just plays with a doll on stage to raucous laughter from the audience.
Hi.
After several minutes of filler and doll diddling, Jeff gets back around to talking about Christmas, and Ahmed tries and fails to do a British accent. Either way, the special basically peters out from here. Ahmed ends it with an Ozempic joke.
I lost 200 pounds on Ozempic.
And there was one final gag where Ahmed asks Jeff to give a bomb to Peanut, but Jeff puts it back in the trunk with Ahmed and it blows up, causing Ahmed to be covered in soot like a Looney Tunes character. The Ahmed portion of the show is difficult for me to figure out because it's not good by any means. Even if you don't view the character as a negative stereotype, it's still trite material for people whose sense of humor peaked at watching Mind of Mencia. That said, this part of the show is less unbearable than the Bubba J segment, and even with the filler where Jeff fondles Ahmed's bones, there is still more substance here than the Little Jeff and Peanut segments, which were just product placement. So where does that leave us? Jeff Dunham's Scrooged-Up holiday special is undeniably one of the worst comedy specials I've ever reviewed for this channel. Based on integrity alone, I feel like the roughly 18-minute portion of the show that took the form of glorified ad reads would be enough to put this in the bottom tier. 18 minutes in the heart of a stand-up special is given over to what is basically a QVC show with some dick jokes and forced social commentary thrown in. I feel like any other comic would be rightfully shredded for even attempting something this shameless. It's so shameless and creatively bankrupt that it's kind of hard for me to fathom. Jeff's social and political comedy are pretty whack too. Half the time he's just saying buzzwords like diversity as if that is a punchline in and of itself. The jokes are so flimsy and shoehorned into the rest of this material that it almost makes me want to go back and watch some of his older specials to see if my memory is being too generous to him. Maybe these issues wouldn't be enough to make the special a total disaster if it were also funny, but it's not. No matter how many genital jokes and wacky voices Jeff stuffs into this special like a Christmas goose, it never manages to achieve anything particularly funny. It's actually similar to a Joe Rogan special in that regard. Side note, there were also several trans jokes. And I don't mean like jokes about being trans or social commentary about trans issues or trans people. They're just jokes about people getting gender reassignment surgery.
Then he had that operation and he was my other mother. And finally, can a gingerbread man transition?
Oh, so then Tiny Tim becomes Tiny Tina?
In almost every case, they also seem to be randomly thrown in there for no particular reason, but I digest. As I said earlier, I watched this special with other people, and none of us laughed. Not even once. I wasn't expecting Richard Pryor or George Carlin out of the special, I was expecting stereotypes, dick jokes, and lowbrow humor. The bar was set pretty low at the beginning, and I was still disappointed. The only case you can make for this special is that at least the changes between characters prevents it from being totally oppressive. The fact that a part of the show like the Bubba J segment eventually ends is basically the only saving grace. It's like occasionally a window gets opened and you're given a breath of fresh air. But what does that really say about the special when the only positive you can come up with is that eventually the profoundly bad segment will be over and give way to one that is just regular bad? The real issue, to me, is that even this variety is still something of an illusion. I hope I'm not destroying anyone's suspension of disbelief, but Jeff is the one doing all of the characters. If he didn't have the contrivance of the dolls, I think this special would feel significantly worse. The props, because that is ultimately what they are, put some perceived distance between Jeff and the terrible jokes he is telling. The dolls act as a mitigating factor for how bad you view these jokes to be. They lower the bar because they kind of trick your mind into thinking Jeff isn't saying these things, the characters are. Imagine Jeff just on stage doing these characters and telling these jokes without the proxy of a doll. It would be truly dreadful. Taking that into consideration, it alters my perception of this special. At face value, it would be pretty bad. But when I try to divorce the material from the method of delivery and judge the jokes simply on their own merit, it becomes astoundingly bad. Jeff Dunham's Scrooged-Up holiday special is among the worst comedy specials I've ever seen. It belongs in the bottom of the pit alongside Jeff Foxworthy's The Good Old Days. But that just makes me ask one question. What's the deal with Jeffs? As always, I want to thank you for watching the video, as well as liking, commenting, and subscribing. And a special thank you to my supporters on Patreon, who help make these videos possible. Thank you. Squirt, Rusty Shackelford, Jackson, Fightback CBD, Mike Roballs, Bone CK, Mango Saver, Devil Stick Disco, Mad Maxburger, Julius Nisha Patton, Scott Richmond, Random Candor, Fuzzy Yanus, Jonas Naamanson, Old Neon, Timothy Lee Peterson, Julius Caesar Has Jungle Fever, Bobby Flog, Firebrand, and Quasi.